my daughter can sit on her Chromebook and do her lecture while she's on her iPhone doing TikTok shit while she's
Yeah.
playing a Switch and still get A's on stuff. And I'm
Oh,
like, man, I couldn't even sit in class. Like I had no chance.
yeah,
I did not learn to concentrate until I was in my mid 20s. That's all
exactly.
there. I would have been doomed. My 13-year-old's a little bit more like me though, because she's like, I'd rather just. And she's told me, or she's told both of us, she's like, I'd rather just go to school and die of COVID than do this online shit. You're like, I get it, man. I feel the same way, but what are you gonna do? So
Yeah. I think the pressure's on the parents because it's like, we didn't sign up to be teachers. So like, what do you do? Like, that's an art form, man, to be able to
man,
teach people.
if it makes you feel any better, my wife is a associate professor of nursing at Purdue,
Uh-huh.
and I teach in the history department at Purdue.
Okay.
So we teach, like my wife teaches hundreds of students every semester.
All right.
We have struggled with our kids'
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, but you guys are teaching college students. A little different.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
You gotta
ours
have a
is.
different temperament. Yeah.
Well, you don't want to come to class? Well, then you fail. I don't care. Like you paid your money.
Yeah. Thanks for the money, buddy. Thanks.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. There you go. Have a good one, guys. That's it.
Good luck with all that debt later on.
Yeah, you don't want to turn anything in? That's cool by me. I'll just give you enough. I don't have to grade. I'm set.
Thank
That's
you for
fine.
making my job easier. Yeah. All right, brother.
Yeah,
Let's
dealing
do
with
this, man.
that
You got
is
any questions about anything?
no, not at all. I'll just go with whatever you've got. I do have kids at home. I have dogs. I have a wife running around, so there might be a little bit of background noise, but
That's
that's
fine.
it.
That's
You're in
fine.
my home office. So
I
this
see
is
that. It
what.
looks really nice, man. Awesome.
Have you ever seen? Actually, have you ever seen A Christmas Story?
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
So,
I see it. Fragile
yeah.
right there. Yeah.
So here's the thing. I grew up in Hammond on Cleveland Street. So Gene Shepard, the guy who wrote it,
Uh-huh.
grew up. I mean, 40 years before me, on the next block over. That was our big claim to fame, right?
Yeah.
So I make sure that the Fragile lamp goes with me wherever we go. So
Awesome, man. That's awesome. All right, man.
yeah,
So let's do
I'm
this.
ready. Yep.
You still agree to your to all the terms of the consent and release form that I sent you?
Yes.
All right, awesome. So here we go. Let's take a little bit of a pause. I'll count backwards. We'll pause and then we'll begin. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my show. Today, my guest is a person that I served with many, many years ago, back in Italy. I was actually assigned to him. He was, I believe he was a throttleman, and he was teaching me how to do that, which I had never learned. But the things I liked about him, he seemed to talk what was on his mind, and he wasn't afraid to talk. Some people aren't afraid to talk, but what comes out of their mouth is just as bad as what comes out of their backside. But he was different. He was funny. He could make things funny, and you could tell that he was a smart guy. So I'm glad to have him here again on the show. Joseph, can you introduce yourself? Tell everybody just a little bit about who you are.
Yeah. My name's Joseph Coates. I go by Joe. I was born in Hammond, Indiana. I live 45 minutes south of that now. Big commute there. In Valparaiso, Indiana. I'm married. I've got a couple of kids. I'm the reference librarian manager and university archivist at Purdue University Northwest. Um, and that's really kind of who I am in a nutshell. We've
Right.
got a lot more to go over, but yeah, and thank you for that. Being in the Navy was one of those experiences that taught me a lot of things, and one of them was that being in the Navy was not something that I wanted to pursue as a full-time gig. I did do 8.
Oh,
I
wow.
did 4 in active reserve, and that left a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth, and I ended up not re-enlisting that third time. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
and
let's.
Throttles was not an exciting watch either. I can tell you that.
Yeah. Not so much going on there. Yeah.
Not a lot going. It was kind of odd being on one of the last steamships, so it makes you
Yeah.
really feel like a dinosaur, you know.
Yeah, we were. That ship was. It's a beautiful ship. I loved it.
I actually have part of it.
Awesome. What do you
Did you
have?
buy a piece of it when
No, I didn't.
it was the? Let's put it this way: it was not the dumbest $75 I've ever spent.
All right.
I've
Okay.
spent money on substantially dumber things, so I did buy a piece of it when it went up for sale. I think it was $75 for
Or you get a piece
a
like a
square of metal. Huh?
anchor chain or something like that. What'd you get?
No, all they did. Let me see. I've got it right here. They would cut pieces off the hull.
Oh, nice.
They engraved them. They
Yeah.
sandblasted them and engraved them. So it's got. It, this could be off of anything. Who
Yeah,
knows?
exactly.
But it, much like everything else in this world, it's one of those things where you like to believe it is what it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
You
You
go
ever
with
see
it.
the you ever see that thing where people buy pieces of like Noah's Ark?
Oh yeah. Well, at least when I bought this piece from Steel Core or whatever it was, they
Yeah.
were actively scrapping the
Yeah.
ship. So I
Yeah,
have
yeah.
no reason to believe that it
Yeah.
couldn't have been a hunk of metal at least close to it, if
Close
not
to
the end.
yeah, it's seen the
So
Simon Lake probably.
it's close and it's substantially more realistic than a piece of wood from the Ark. So
Yeah. It's too bad we
yeah.
can't do a DNA test on that steel just to verify.
I did find out something interesting about old steel is that if it was prior to 1945,
Uh-huh.
that it actually sells for a higher rate in scrap value because after any steel made after the nuclear blasts in Japan has some sort of something
Defect.
in the steel that
Uh-huh.
affects magnetism or something. So the older steel that was produced before that somehow, and I'm not a metallurgist, but I
Right.
read it in a reputable source because they were talking about the one of our buildings on campus was being torn down and it was built in the late 30s, and they were able to actually sell the steel girders for scrap instead of just sending them away for scrap. And I was kind of reading about it and I thought that was
Yeah.
kind of interesting. So yeah, yeah.
That's
But I think
okay.
the lake was built in the 60s, so it was just plain old junk steel. So
Yeah. But it means something to us, for those of us who
it does.
served on board.
Yes,
Yeah.
it does. It does. Yeah.
So take us back, man. What brought you to the decision to join the military?
Oh, well, I was terrible in school. I had no idea that I didn't know I was going to graduate until probably about 3 days before my high school graduation. And I ended up being able to eke a D out of a geometry class, get my diploma. And I wasn't, I wasn't a good student. Um, and I really had no direction. And after about a year and a half of working, literally living in my parents' basement, working midnights at a grocery store for $7-8 an hour. This was mid '90s. I'm in my 40s now. I thought, man, there's got to be something better. And I tried getting into the the unions. I tried getting into the steel mill, and the economy was doing well, so places could be pickier on who they picked. And it sort of seemed like the military was the best option for me at the time. So I went into the Navy. My great uncle Bob um, did 27 years.
Oh wow.
Um, when he was 18, he's still alive. He's in his 90s. He lives up in
Oh, God
Wisconsin.
bless him.
His I think when he said he was 18 years and 1 month old, he was driving Higgins boats back and forth onto Normandy Beach in World War II.
Jesus.
And so he was an E1 bosun's mate, 18 years old, and he retired in the mid 70s. He was his last command. He was the executive officer of the USS Bainbridge, which was a nuclear powered cruiser.
Oh yeah, they don't have those
So
anymore. Yeah.
yeah, so he went from E1 to O4
Wow.
in that time span, and he was up for commander, and they were, or maybe it was late 60s, early 70s,
37.
because he was going to re-enlist, or not re-enlist, but he was going to stay in because he was getting close to being commander.
Mm-hmm.
But he was going to get sent back to Vietnam.
Okay.
And his wife told him, said, look, you were in World War II, you were in Korea, like he was
Right.
in the Korean War.
Yeah,
And
yeah, I get it. Yeah.
and he was, going back to Vietnam for a second or third time. And she said, get the hell out, take the pension, get out.
Yes.
So he got out. And he has told me in the past that it was the best job that he ever had. And I thought, well, I could do that. I don't want to sleep in dirt. I don't want to do.
Right, right.
There was a lot of the things that other branches that weren't appealing. And to me, it seemed like the Navy had more opportunity if you were going to go into the trades or something.
Definitely. It definitely does. Yeah.
But I was talked out of the Marines by every Marine I knew. I was talked out of the Army by my father, who was a draftee. I was disqualified for the Coast Guard because I had too many traffic violations,
Oh,
and I wasn't
geez.
smart enough for the Air Force.
There you
So
go.
Navy was
So what you got? Yeah.
that's what I got. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
The other way to look at it, it was destiny.
yes, yeah. It fit my personality a little bit more than the other branches. I couldn't see myself even now being, I couldn't see myself doing any of this now, but I couldn't see myself doing any other branch. It seemed it was a good fit for me. So
Yeah. I agree. I agree. It fits your personality. Being a
yeah,
sailor is a different type of thing. Unless you've been
most
there, you
certainly.
don't know. Yeah.
I did listen to your podcast of the I believe she was a captain, currently a captain
Oh, yes, yes,
in
yes.
the Army. I
Captain
don't remember.
McShane.
Yes, and it seemed like she very much has that Army type personality,
Uh-huh.
whereas I don't think that her type of personality would work well in the Navy. It seemed like it's a little, and I hate to be cliche, but it seems like just knowing people, it's a little more piratey. There's that certain amount of disrespectfulness that goes with it. You
It's a
have
little bit more
aristocracy.
Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yes. You have a certain amount of aristocracy amongst the officer corps, and then the enlisted are slightly more. From all the people that I've known who've been Navy are usually a little bit smarter than average, but a little more disrespectful than average. So I don't think it really works to anybody's advantage. But
No,
I think it's
but it
just
works
it's a
at sea.
personality trait. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. On land, it's probably not too good, but once you put a person on a boat like that, oh, it works.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah. You don't have to
Yeah,
deal with too many people. So it seems to work out. So
yeah, that's
yeah.
spot on, man. That's spot on.
So
So you became an electrician. Is that something you wanted to do?
my plan was to go into the trades when I got out. So my big plan was to either stay in the Navy, do 20 years and get out, or do something that I could correspond to civilian life.
Mhm.
So I picked electrician because, well, my grandfather was an electrician. Um, it seemed easier, not easier, like not easier work. It seemed less physical, a little more mental.
Yeah, okay.
I like the process of trying to troubleshoot things.
Right.
And to me, that seemed to be a little more fitting of the type of thing that I like to do. Um, and I did it, and I don't think I was terribly. I don't think I was a very good electrician, but I did learn a lot, and it teaches you a certain amount of troubleshooting skill and critical thinking skill,
Definitely.
things that you don't get a lot of time in other jobs. So I really think it was less monotony, and it was kind of, you don't do the same thing every day. And I thought
Right.
that was kind of nice. You had a little bit of variety. So
Yeah. Then there was the whole like OSHA 3M part of it too. The maintenance, make sure you got your tags, It was like
Yes,
I felt like that prepared you for when you get out to like just a trade job on the union or something because you got to do all that stuff.
yeah, yeah. I come from an area where it's mostly steel mills and refineries, and that was very much one of the things. The lockout, tag out
Uh-huh.
is a huge part of the trades. Um, so yeah, so that kind of experience was really what I needed in my life, and I think it challenged me and it taught me responsibility more so than it taught me electrical work. When I went to the Emory S land, I was actually put in charge of tool issue, and I did
Okay.
tool issue for a year. I was a work center supervisor. I had made third class on the lake, and then I went to the
MRS land.
land. I did tool issue for a year. Pardon me. And then I ended up getting out because I saw the opportunity to make better money and a better life because of what my wife and I did.
Okay.
So my wife, we weren't married at the time. We got married when I got out, but she had finished nursing school in '98 and was working at University of Chicago at the time. So that really gave me an opportunity, to get out and to do something else while she was able to work. So we were able to have a regular household.
Right.
And that's why when I got out, I went in the reserves. Um, I did the intelligence specialist school, and I got out as an IS2 and after 4 years.
Wow.
I got out in 2005 because I had a year off. Um, I was trying to get deployed while I was in the reserves, and I kept getting running into the you're an AVET. They were sending all the E4s with like less than 2 years in.
Mm-hmm.
I was an E5 going on 8. I was more expensive to send, so
Oh, okay.
I had that issue of we're on a tight budget. We're doing 179-day deployments, blah 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 blah. And when I got turned down to go on deployment, I thought to myself, well, why the hell am I here then?
Okay.
So I just got out. It was fine. I didn't miss it enough uh, to really for it to hurt my feelings that much. I got a congratulations go. I get my second going away NAM
Yeah.
and called it good. And figured, well, that can go in a box and I'll go back
Grandpa's
to
box somewhere. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
40 years later.
Yeah, and that was that. So yeah, it was '05 when I got out. So
Yeah. Okay. So in the intelligence field, that's interesting because I've met some people and they always have like some kind of like crazy story, like a weird, it seems like a weird, weird group of people. I don't know. You got any weird stories about that?
no, you know what? It was actually fairly. I worked in a fairly benign area.
Okay.
I mean, this is going to sound like one of those stupid things. I don't know what I'm allowed to say and what I'm not allowed to say
Okay.
because of the
Just be careful.
clearance,
I can
right?
always edit it out too, I guess.
And it's not like I've got any. It's not like I did anything excited, but
Yeah.
basically, I did a lot of research on culture and geography.
Okay.
So really, I think part of the reason why I was able to go in was I was finishing up my undergraduate in history, and I was doing a lot of research and doing a lot of reading and doing a lot of writing and that kind of stuff. And basically, that's what I did when I was in the reserves. Is we covered a lot of geopolitical,
Hmm.
stuff. Sometimes I felt like I was, prepping an elementary school class for a geography lesson on
Field trip
stuff.
somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. So it was. I did really nothing exciting. My deployments were to Virginia. Um, so I do 2 weeks in Virginia, and then I would do my weekends up at Fort Sheridan up by Great Lakes, and that was pretty much my entire Navy Reserve career. So it was
Yeah.
I wore a dress uniform in the reserves more than I ever wore a dress uniform on active duty. I can tell you that.
Yeah. Coveralls. That was the thing.
That was it. Oh, that was the
I
best
loved it.
uniform I
That was
owned.
great. I know. I just wake up, throw it on. Oh yeah.
Put on some boots, put on some coveralls. You're good to go. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe a
Um,
hat if you're going outside. That was about
yeah.
it.
Yeah. There was a lot of wearing white pants in the summer
Ah,
to
jeez.
in Virginia, and you're thinking, why do we have to wear white pants? Like,
Yeah.
why don't we have an actual working uniform?
They do now. I don't know if you've seen it.
They
They do
do,
now.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And
The
I
peanut
always
butter
thought,
cups or
man,
whatever.
yeah. Now, I will tell you, in the reserves, it was a joint command. So, like, our, I guess, equivalent of like a division officer,
Hmm.
she was an Air Force second lieutenant, and then our CO and XO were both Navy, but there were a lot of Army personnel and Air Force personnel. We had a gunnery sergeant. I don't know. I'm not even sure what he did. Um,
Played
but he
with
was in
guns.
charge of, yeah, he was in charge of something,
Yeah.
but we did wear BDUs for that to sort of blend in with everybody else. But
Okay.
those 2 week deployment or the 2 week, drill or whatever, summer drill, it was always in whites. And you're like, man, can I do this in the winter? At least
The whites, man.
I don't have to spend so much money on dry cleaning. I had 4 sets of whites, and you're like, I'm
Yeah.
spending, $100
Yeah.
on dry cleaning for this.
Yeah. That Navy sea bag back in the day, man, so many uniforms. And then I talked to people from other branches. They got like 2, 3 uniforms. We had like 6. I don't know. It was 2 sets of whites, 2 sets of blues. Like
Oh yeah,
Jesus.
yeah.
And then
Hats.
being engineers, then you get coveralls, and
Right.
they got real anal about the coveralls. You had to be a certain type of coveralls. Oh, jeez.
And they always try to minimize. They try to simplify uniforms, and they make it worse every time
Yes.
they do it.
Yes, they were
You
successful at
just
that.
think, boy, the joy of being a defense contractor making military clothing is that's where the money's at right there. Being a defense contractor to
License to
design
print
uniforms.
money. Yeah. So am I correct? You're a librarian right now?
Yes.
How did you get there? Because I think I remember you talking about that on Assignment Late as a goal of
Yeah.
yours.
Well, one of my goals was when I when I did my undergraduate. I went for secondary education. I was going to teach high school, and at the time, um, basically, I was going to take the areas that nobody else wanted to teach. That way, I would be able to find a job easier. So that involved government, economics, and what was
Math
the
or
other?
something?
Psychology,
Psychology.
because it was kind of built into that social science history thing.
Okay.
So I got about 2/3 of the way through my degree, and living in Indiana, we had to take a course on Indiana history to teach social studies in the state of Indiana. It makes sense. And my class was taught by a guy named Steve McShane, who was the archivist of the Calumet Regional Archives at Indiana University Northwest.
Okay.
And we had a class in the library building on the 3rd floor, and right across from it was the archive. And the one day he said, "Oh yeah, we'll do a tour." And I walked in and I looked around and I thought, there's boxes and boxes and boxes of documents and
Yeah.
books and stuff. And I was like, what the hell is this? Like,
He's a
what
hoarder.
is this? And he explained, oh, these are the papers from Congressman
Yeah.
Adam Benjamin, and these are the Visclosky papers, and these are the papers from so and so, and this is from the now defunct Gary radio station from 1940 before white flight, and and going through it. I thought, oh my God, look at all this stuff. And I said, well, what do you have to do to get this job? And he said, well, used to be you'd get a master's degree in history, so now it's a master's degree in library science and that. So I changed my major that semester
Wow.
to do history, and then I got my first job out of college. I worked 6 days a week for 3 years. I worked 5 days a week as a branch manager at a small rural public library, and I worked one day a week as the archivist for a small Catholic college right up by Chicago, Calumet College of St. Joseph. They finally hired me full time, so I was the archivist and reference librarian there, right around 1,000 students for the school total. And I went to graduate school, and I did my master's degree at Clarion University of Pennsylvania. It was an online program. It was accredited. They did in person and online. Um, and about 6 months after that, the position that I'm in now opened up. I applied for it, and I managed to fool them into hiring me. And I've been there over 6 years, and now I'm kind of the assistant director, and still have the archive gig. Um, but yeah, it's been so if you count my intern time and all that, I've been working in libraries for about 15 years now.
Wow.
So it's taken up a good chunk of my adult life at this point. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Like it,
it was kind of funny. You'll appreciate this. This might be a little more blue than necessary, but when I finished my graduate degree, I went to the local gun shop to get myself a graduation gift. I am from Indiana, so that's what we do here. We don't buy a
right.
classroom. So I bought a Springfield Armory 1911.
Okay.
So I'm at the desk. I took my dad. So my dad and I are there, and I'm at the desk, and there's this girl that works there. She was behind the counter, and she's carrying a big Glock on her side.
Jeez. Yeah.
And she said, "Oh, who's getting the 1911?" I said, "Oh, it's my graduation gift to myself." And she said, "Oh yeah." She said, "What did you get your master's degree in?" Or I said, "I get my master's degree."
Right. Right. Right.
And being a close to middle aged white dude, most people figure, "Oh, he got an MBA, right? That's what you get." And my dad turned around and looked at me with this big shit eating grin on his face, and he was like, "Yeah, what did you get yours in?" And I looked at her and I said, "Library science." And she kind of looked at me and she started to smile. And I said, "Oh, so that's an unusual reaction. Usually, when I tell women that I'm a librarian, the panties just slide right off."
Yeah. Yeah.
Thought it was funny as hell. But yeah, it's kind of a hard thing to explain to people that yes, there are men that are librarians for a living. It seems to be I like to consider it, instead of being a defender of, you have these knuckleheads that stormed the Michigan uh, government building with their
Oh
guns for
yeah.
whatever. They're
Yeah.
defenders of the Second Amendment. I consider myself a defender of the First Amendment.
Yeah.
The
We'll get
freedom
into that. Yeah.
is rather helpful for people. So, but yeah, that was my. I did that. I've been doing this ever since. I'm being. I, as I see every different role of it, I realize that I'm getting better at the managerial part, but worse at the actual librarian part,
Mm.
which I think is kind of a natural thing that the further into management you get, the more out of touch you get. So I
Yeah.
still try to teach as much as I can, um, to make sure that I don't become one of those incompetent old people that has no idea what the hell's going on. I need to really stay. It's a field that's hard to stay current on, because everything is changing in
Yeah. I wanted to get
incremental
into that.
terms.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah,
About the evolution of that job, because that job has changed a lot. So I remember being that young kid going into the library, and going into the
yeah.
library was like going into a Catholic church. It was like,
Mhm.
shh, like be quiet, you know what I mean? And being a young kid, you're gonna make noise.
Oh
I got
yeah,
hit with the so many times. And
uh-huh.
it used to be this really old, creepy, mean looking lady. You know what I mean? I didn't see the sexy librarian thing. I never saw that. I just saw that on TV. The
Yeah.
libraries
I
in my
haven't either.
neighborhood, yeah. The libraries in my neighborhood had the meanest, oldest women. You know
Uh-huh.
what I mean?
Yeah.
They were, ooh, those would hurt. It was like a slap, like, oh. But just to feel like so when I finally went back years later, I went to university 2011, and I went to the campus university, and I walked in, and it was like a nightclub. There
Yeah.
was like music playing, everybody got their frappuccinos. I mean, and the whole first floor was like just a big conversation, all this noise. I'm like, I'm in the wrong building. Like it's supposed to be quiet, dead quiet, right? No, it just it's changed. And even like finding the books, they had like this mechanical system, like no more Dewey Decimal. Obviously you have the search, and you have that computer where you could search
Uh-huh.
where things are, but they also had like a robotic system where they had books that weren't on the shelves,
Oh,
like
you
this
had the
like
robotic
system.
arm that would go
Yeah, we
down to
just
pick the
go
box
around.
out.
Yeah, like the
dropping it.
soda machine, like it grabs your Pepsi. It
Yeah.
was like that. It was just I stepped into a completely different world.
I
Can you speak
I
about
live
that?
about 3 miles from Valparaiso University, which was one of the first places to have one of those
Hmm.
robotic things installed. It's trippy. It really is. Um, just to you know, when I did my library science degree, there were two of us out of our cohort of like 30 some students
Uh-huh.
um, who had actually ever seen a card catalog. So, growing up in the 80s, we saw the card catalog. Right around the 90s is when they started putting everything online in
Yeah.
an OPAC,
Hmm.
which is it's an online catalog. Um, and now there's barely any places that have the card catalog. Everything's
Wow.
digital. The books
Yeah.
are, we spend less and less money on paper books and more money. Well,
Digital. Yeah.
ours is a little bit different because we're academic, so we have a different audience. We have a
Hmm.
lot more of the peer reviewed, the journals, that kind of stuff. The bulk of what we do now, it's finding journal articles for
Yeah.
research. We have ebooks. We have ebooks that are supplemental to the textbooks that the students use,
Hmm.
that we can pull and drop right into their electronic course.
Yeah.
We use we just switched from Blackboard to, I
The
can't
new
remember
thing.
the new one. But yeah,
There'll
you
be
can
another
drop
one, new
full.
one coming. Don't worry
There'll
about
be
it.
another one in about 5 years. By
Yeah.
the time I get used to this one, yeah, we can record videos and embed those into the classes to
Yeah.
show our students how to find articles and how to tell the difference between peer reviewed and BS. That's
Hmm.
kind of our big goal, is to make sure that our students understand the type of media that they're looking at, and learn how to um, sort of disseminate information from good and bad, and
Right.
bad. The better job that we do of making people understand what kind of um, media they're paying attention to, the better educated our population as a whole is. And that's kind
Right.
of that's sort of the big arch, is to make people information literate, not just here's a book, here's a database, here's this, but
Well,
how
I
do you
read it.
tell?
I read it in a book, so it must be true. It's
Right,
sort of
right.
just like the
Yeah,
internet. Yeah, I read it on the
yeah,
internet.
exactly. And that's one of the big things. And we encounter this all the time because of the culture that we have, where you can have alternate reality. Um,
Fake news,
yeah, fake news, alternate facts,
alternate facts.
alternate facts. There's just so much BS going around, and people are inundated with it, and it's sometimes hard to tell the difference between
Yeah.
real and fake information. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I
that's
kind of
been
see the librarian as that's your role, sort of the keeper of that. Like, hey, listen, buddy, this is what's what. This is where this came from. Know where you're getting your source of information from.
yeah. And there's a lot of methods that we use. We have what they'll do. This is perfect for the military. Should be able to teach this because it's all acronyms.
Mhm.
There's the crap test. Is it current? Is it relevant? Is it, I forgot what A. I can't remember what any of this stuff. I'm on break right now, so I
Right,
just
right.
did brain dump. And then you have, can I apply, or something like that.
Uh-huh.
I don't remember the exact thing. It was devised by somebody from Marshall University and Penn State. So you can go through this checklist to make sure that your sources are legitimate source,
Yeah.
best possible information. And that's kind of one of the big things that we encounter, is explaining to students that, as much as you like to read that um, as your daily news source, it's easily debunked. So you may want to not. It's 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 hard to explain to people the difference between fake news and a personal bias. You know,
Yes.
you can debate policy all the time. Is giving out this $2,000 stimulus check the right thing or the wrong thing to do economically? I don't know. I'm
Right.
not an economist,
Yeah.
but when you read some of it about, oh, so and so blocked this because of this, and so did it. You can check all that
Uh-huh.
to not be fooled into seeing, hey, no, the actual way that these lawsuits or congressional bills are working, you can see, you can follow. This is all public information. Like
Right.
you can see who killed the bill. Like
Right.
you can see who voted for it or against it. Don't believe it just because you saw it on a meme on Facebook.
And we're living in an age where it's so much easier today to look that up, which as you know, the method of distraction has been around for a long time, and we're going to keep the people
Right.
confused, right? So I think
Right.
with the advent of these things, right, these smartphones and the
Uh-huh.
internet and the search engines, making it so much easier to like you said, follow the trace, follow the breadcrumbs, right? I think all these other distractions had to come up in order for politicians and other people to get away with what they're getting away with. Like there had to be other things, like, yes, I could read this thing about my taxes, or I could see J-Lo dancing in a skirt, you know what I mean? Like,
Right. Well, and it's not just that, it's the way that people don't understand how the internet works. So when you look at, the way that Google analyzes your information, you're going to find a lot of things that match your bias.
the
So
algorithms, is that what you're talking about?
yeah, the algorithm. So you're going to live within your own bubble if you're and people want to hear what they want to hear. That's
Yeah,
that's
confirmation
just a
bias.
fact.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't want to get all political, but one of the things that I keep seeing is, oh, all these court cases were thrown out procedurally.
Mm-hmm.
The election cases that have been thrown out. Well, this is a no, they weren't, because you can actually go on and read them all
Okay.
because you have access to it. So you can see why they were thrown out. Like
Uh-huh.
you can read it and go, you don't have evidence. That's
Yeah.
why I'm throwing this case out.
Right.
I
Right.
mean, if there's voter fraud, great. Take it to court, fight
Yeah.
it. Like that's I don't want corrupt government politicians. I don't want corrupt government. I don't care if they have an R or a D behind their name. If you're corrupt and get caught, you should go to prison. Like I'm fine with that. I have no issue with that.
Right.
But
It's
when
not
people
a
make
political thing, right? Yeah.
yeah, we should hold our politicians to a higher standard. They work for
Oof.
us,
Jeez. Oof.
and we it shouldn't be a race towards the bottom. But just because you saw on whatever whoever you watch, Sean Hannity, Rachel Maddow, whoever, I don't care who you're watching,
Right.
look at what they're actually saying and then go and look at that yourself and go, they weren't being entirely factual about that, and hold their feet to the fire. That's
Well, a lot of the news is opinionated. Well, I think that's the guys that I think they have an agenda. They're pushing an agenda, but the reason why they can get away with certain stuff is to say that, well, my newscast is opinionated news. Where
right.
usually
One
back
of
in the
the
day there was no opinionated. It was just the facts. You know what I mean?
right.
Like
This
Dragnet.
is the whole. This is the whole like Ted Turner thing, right? When I
Uh-huh.
was a kid, you would turn on the 2, 5, or 7,
We
and
had three
watch.
options. That was it. Yeah. Or maybe PBS after that. Yeah.
Yeah, you could watch. Well, we had WTTW. Well, yeah, that's
Okay.
PBS.
Yeah.
WTTW, and you could watch Chicago Tonight with whatever.
Yeah.
But when TBS came out, and you had the Turner. Oh, we had WGN, which is why there's so many Cubs fans across the country, because WGN would reach nationwide on its
Was
big
it?
fifty
Yeah.
thousand
National.
watt
Yeah.
radio, and they televised or they broadcast the Cubs. So
Yeah.
if you didn't have a radio station or if you didn't have a team around, you listen to the Cubs.
Right.
PBS started, or Ted Turner started CNN,
Mm-hmm.
and CNN had to fill that 24-hour news cycle. So
Yeah.
what used to be labeled as an editorial is now the news.
Mm-hmm.
And people don't understand that when you're watching
You kind of
the
broke up. You're choppy now.
you're probably not.
You're cutting in and out, brother. No, I can't. I can't hear you. Hello, Joseph. if I can get you back here. Might have to stop this. Oh, there you go. You're back.
Oh, good, good.
There we go.
Yeah, sorry about that. That's
So you
the
were
joy
saying
of,
the editorial, and you were transitioning into
yeah, people don't understand the difference between editorial and real news. And that's been one of the problems, is that people for an editorial can say whatever they want to say,
right,
as long as they're not committing slander or libel, whatever.
right.
Um, and people believe that those editorials, because they look like the news, they're on the news channel,
They have the suit
that it's
on.
really news. Yeah, they have a suit on, they look reputable. That those are actually all opinion pieces, or editorials. A lot of them are based in fact. Some of them are based in bullshit.
Yeah.
But the problem is that people, again, we circle back to that information literacy. People don't know how the news works, so they kind of just. And then you have some that are just blatant lies that are made up to raise money for something because they know there's an audience and they can get clicks and
Yeah, that's
you know,
crazy, man.
if you look at there's a big chart that shows all the different news media and whether they lean left or right, and that should be mandatory for people to have to look at every once in a while and go, oh, wait a minute, you know, maybe all this information that I'm getting from Vox is actually left leaning, and maybe I should look at something else,
Yeah.
to see if it's
I
not
try to
like.
switch back and forth as much as I can, but I feel like I'm being lied to by both stations, so it doesn't really,
Yeah,
you know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah, and that's one of those. I tell people, look at the AP and look at Reuters. That's where you're going to get your two most reliable news sources. It's going to be pretty much all the boring. Here's what happened, and then you can kind of decide for yourself
Yeah.
what's going on.
Yeah. I don't mind people arguing so much on the news. I mean, I don't like it. Is that's the reason why you have a show? Like, you're selling arguments. I don't like that. What I'm saying is, I don't mind that people disagree, that we fundamentally have different stances on stuff, because it's normal, man, even in your own family. But when
Oh
you
yeah,
start to like what you said, which is present something as if that's a fact. And it's like, no, man, that's not really what's going on. You know what I mean?
right, right.
Yeah.
You can argue domestic policy, you can argue foreign policy, big government, small government, what should be more done on a federal level, what should be
Right.
more done on a state level, how the schools should be funded. Those are all things that you can have differences of opinion on, and that's fine. The problem is that people are coming to those conclusions with bad information. If everybody had correct information, you can make much more educated um, stances, and not base your governmental decisions on half truths and lies. And that's one of the big issues that we have.
Yeah.
You know,
It seems that the founding fathers, when they created our form of government, well, that was a big part of it. An informed population will make better decisions.
well, not just that, but the fact that they didn't want one branch of government to have too much power over the other. And probably since the 1970s, 1980s, more and more of the power that isn't part of the executive branch has gone from Congress to the executive branch.
Yeah.
So you're sitting on where presidents nowadays, not just the current one, but
Going back,
Biden,
right? Yeah.
going back to Obama and Bush, and they've all had too much power, because
Yeah.
a lot of that power, Congress sort of handed it over to them to make decisions, so they don't have to be held accountable for bad decisions for their voting base. They got to get reelected. The House has to get reelected every 2 years.
Yeah.
You make
Point
a
the finger
mistake, it's going to be
somewhere.
fresh in
Yeah.
your mind.
Yeah. So this is a thing that I've had a lot of issues with. This is one of the, like, our school system, this, people don't understand. So you talk about the three separate branches of government, and I
Uh-huh.
remember telling people, like, man, like, just take a look at it. Like, the president isn't like a king. Like, it's supposed to be the legislative branch, right? They make the rules. Here's what you can and can't do, and then the president, sort of the executive, he says, okay, well, this is within these limits, within these parameters.
Yep.
this is what I'm going to do. So the real power actually lied in this hodgepodge, this mess of a Senate and a House and
Yeah,
trying to get
yeah.
things done. You know what I mean? Like, so whoever,
Congress made
yeah, whoever gets,
that's the thing.
yeah, whoever gets elected, I remember people saying like, this person's going to destroy the country. I'm like, it's not really up to them. But you're right. Like the executive branch has gotten more and more. I forgot what do they call that in Congress? The executive power.
Oh, the executive orders that they
Yeah,
can
yeah,
sort of
executive
say
order. But
stuff there.
there's a phrase in the Constitution where they say this is where it comes from. He has these executive what's it called? I don't know. It'll come
Yeah,
to me.
that's okay.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the whole thing I try to explain to people when the legislation makes the laws. The Supreme Court makes sure that the laws are legitimate and upholdable and legal. Um, and then the president is the one that's supposed to execute those laws uh, practical, to make it a practical thing. The Senate decides, the Congress makes decisions. The president sort of said, they all work together. The president wants to get certain things done, takes it to Congress. They sort of do this,
Yeah.
blah, 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 blah. But people just seem to understand or seem to think that whatever they read is going to just happen because, oh, he's the president, he can do what he wants. And you're like, no,
Yeah.
they call that a
Literally
dictatorship.
not how it works. Yeah.
Yeah, we literally don't. And I've been one of those people who have talked against, the executive being too strong, even in presidents that I liked. You're like,
Right.
we're giving these guys way too much authority and way too much power and not enough accountability,
Mm.
for it to be comfortable for us. We should really not let people have that much control.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I don't know. That's
Let's
sort
go
of,
into
but
another thing. It's related.
yeah,
Like I said, I had two things about that drives me nuts when I talk to people and people who have been, they've been born and raised in this country. Maybe their parents were born and raised in this country, and just basic things like that about government that they don't understand. So let's talk about the electoral college. Now,
sure.
I understood it from back in high school, right?
Uh-huh.
So when it happened, when Bush beat Gore and Gore
Right.
got the popular vote, I knew it. I understood it. I was not shocked like all these people were. But
Sure.
then it happened again now with Hillary and Clinton, and people were still shocked. And I'm like,
Uh-huh.
listen, you don't understand how this game is played, do you? It's just it drives me nuts. Like,
To me, I mean, I understand how it works. I don't like it. I don't think it should be a thing. But on the other hand, it's going to be hard to get rid of because it allows either party to have a chance if they have unpopular decisions.
mhm.
Like if you can sway just enough people in certain states, then you don't need to get them. There was a guy who did a mathematical breakdown of how you can win the presidency with like 22% of the popular vote. And to me, there's nothing, if you have a system where that can be a thing,
Mhm.
that's really not a good system. One of the big
There's no
arguments,
good systems, but yeah,
there is no good system, right?
right.
But it's a flawed system. One of the things that gets me is when they're like, oh well, look, California and New York and Texas get to make and Chicago and look, they
The
get, and
heavy
you're like, yeah,
populated places, yeah.
you're like, yeah, that's where the people live. Like, of course, you know, Brown County, Indiana doesn't get more of a say than
Right.
wherever because there's less people there.
Yeah.
Then you run into the argument: do people vote, or does pop, or does real estate vote? Then
Right.
and I understand why it was a thing and why it can be good, but on the other hand, I think we've actually had 4 elections in our history that the popular vote didn't win the presidency.
Right.
And that's a
In the
little
history
bit,
of our country, not like in the history since me and you've been alive.
No, there's been
Okay.
two
Okay.
since we were
Okay.
alive.
Okay. Yeah.
I think one of them was
The
Rutherford
Bush
B.
Gore and now Hillary
Yeah,
and Trump. Yeah.
Hillary and Trump and Rutherford. I think it was Hayes, the Tilden Hayes election
It's
in
way before my time, man.
1870. Yeah, it's 1870 something. And then there was another one. I can't remember which one, but yeah, it goes way back, and um, I don't think it's a good system. But
So I like the electoral college, and I'll explain that a little bit. The thing I don't like about it, and that's sort of a thing they kind of went over really quick in history class in high school, which was your vote doesn't count. You know, like
right,
the house or the in the state in the local legislation could, oh, you guys voted for this guy, I don't like it, I'm gonna give the vote to this guy. So
right,
that part of the electoral college I don't like, but I actually do like the fact that we're broken down into 50 states, right? Let's just say this is a huge fancy apartment building somewhere in Chicago, right? And they're all different houses, right? Different apartments, all 50 of them, right? One or two, let's say, the New York and Chicago, or New York and LA, two ones on the coast, right? So theoretically, like you're saying with that 22%, a person, if we go to just the popular vote, could win just one state and lose 49 and still become president. So I look at it as a, like I said, like a large high-rise apartment building where you have one apartment and there's a lot of people living in that apartment, way more if you combined all the rest of the apartments. And they want certain laws enacted within this apartment building. They want to party all night long, no more noise regulations or restriction on how many guests or whatever. But since they have more people living in this one apartment, they get to kind of dictate. So I like the fact that each apartment sort of gets a vote, because I see there being a big problem if someone gets elected and they only won like two states, like New York and California. And if 48 other states are like pissed off, like this is
right.
going to be a problem.
Yeah, yeah, and it's kind of. I mean, one of the arguments has been, oh well, small states won't get a say anymore. But the reality is when you look over the U.S. and the way it votes, and it changes on occasion, but really you only need to persuade like 4 or 5 states.
The purple
You
states.
Yeah, Indiana's gonna be Republican, and California is gonna be Democrat, so you don't even need to show up. You need to
True.
go to Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Michigan and
Ohio, Florida.
Ohio.
Yeah.
Yeah, all those states that are North Carolina, Virginia, Arizona. I mean, it does change from time to
Yeah. Yeah.
time on which ones are more influential than other ones or what way they're. But you really only need to campaign in like 7 states. Like, what's the point of campaigning in Illinois? They're going to vote Democrat.
Yeah.
What the hell are you going to go to Montana for? They're going to be Republican. We'll spend our
Alabama.
time. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We'll just go to North Carolina and Pennsylvania and see what happens. The whole thing should work out for us. So, yeah, it's an odd system. There's a lot of the election things that are irritating to me. I think the election is one of those things that's hard for people to understand because we don't have federal elections. Every election is run by individual states, and all those states have different laws and different things that they do. So you can say, well, what do you mean you get a mail-in ballot without even asking for it? That's illegal. You're like, well, no, it's illegal in Indiana. It's perfectly legal in Michigan.
Right.
And
Yeah.
people don't understand how the voting, I think if people understood how elections and ballots and things actually worked, um, you would have a much better understanding of how polling places, and that's one of those things I tell people that they should, if they have the opportunity, to volunteer at a polling station, um, because I've done it in the past, and all the people that worked there with me, there were I think 8 of us for the district,
Mhm.
and everybody was just more concerned that people were allowed to vote and vote safely and make sure that they were able to exercise their constitutional right and not fix the election.
Right.
And I think people that work in polling places are much more um, concerned about fairness and people actually having their opinions heard, at least
Okay.
from what I've noticed on my time doing it, that I
Wow.
think um, those people can teach other people who would cheat by any means necessary a lesson in what it really means to exercise your rights.
Okay. Before we go, man, one more thing. We've been talking
Yeah,
for a while. You have a close proximity to Chicago. You're a Cubs fan, right?
yeah.
And you grew up close by. What the is going on in Chicago, man? This is something that I talk about a lot on this podcast, like the murder rate, the violence, like what is
Oh,
going on there?
so and I'm not an expert on other places. I've actually the only time I've been in New York has been at JFK. Like I've never actually gotten out of
Gotten out of the
JFK.
airport, yeah.
Yeah, I've been to Boston, I've been to LA, I've been to other big cities, but my wife and kids have been there. My daughter's a big Broadway person, so you know, to me, it's always like, oh, that's a city with the bad subway maps and no alleys. So they put their garbage on the curb. Like, I don't want, like, I
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
want to go, but on the other hand, you're like, those maps are terrible. No, so when Chicago was formed, um, it was formed primarily of immigrants, and I don't know how New York was, if it sort of sort of formed the same way. But you
Yeah.
have to remember, New York is old. New York was settled, kind of, up until the 1800s. This was all a swamp up here, you
Okay.
know. And when everybody started immigrating to Chicago, it really sort of grew up around where your parish was.
Okay.
So if you had a group of Polish immigrants, they put up their parish, and they all lived within walking distance of that. And then the Ukrainians would build their parish, and then
The
so and
Greeks or
so, and
whoever, yeah.
yeah. So you had this very Eastern European ethnic. I mean, one of the areas in Chicago is called Ukrainian Village, which I think is now primarily all Koreans.
Doesn't matter.
But
Doesn't
yeah,
matter.
it's like Humboldt Park used to be all Polish, and now it's all Puerto Ricans.
Yeah,
Like
I know.
the Polish moved somewhere, the Puerto Ricans moved in.
Yeah.
Um, but what ended up happening when the highway system came in, basically they put the expressways right through the middle of the city, and they sort of cut the city up into sections to put expressways in. And then the least desirable areas that were there is where the housing projects went. You've heard of like Robert Taylor Home,
Okay.
Cabrini Green,
Cabrini
all
Green,
that.
I've heard, yeah.
So basically, they shoved all the African American folks into the shittiest area, right? In that area surrounded by expressways.
Mm-hmm.
There's always been sort of that us versus them mentality of our group lives here, our group lives here, our group lives here. And that sort of oozes into the police, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got this police station is made up of primarily Greeks, and this police station is primarily of blah, blah, blah. And a lot of the police live on the very outskirts of the city and not in the
In the
neighborhoods that
suburbs
they're
more.
patrolling.
Right.
Yeah. And it's always had a there's a book, and I think the name of it is I Pig.
Oh,
And
Jesus Christ.
it was written by a Chicago cop
Jesus.
who had gotten he was a motorcycle cop. He had gotten in a lot of trouble for trying to fix the broken police system. But the police system has been so bad over the years that they're just tired of it.
Yeah.
And you know, part of it is truly people that have been given uh, just no chance at life, and they're lashing out. Some of them don't have the educational opportunities that others have had, poor school systems, poor opportunities for employment. And then you have your bad actors in there that are like, oh, now that people are protesting, now it's time to go riot and get our shit.
Yeah.
And that's what they do. And and I'll be honest with you, when I was a kid, think of Chicago pictured in the Blues Brothers, right?
Right.
It was dirty, dingy. It was like watching movies that took place in New York in like the 70s,
Yeah, that
where it's all
grimy sort
that
of
grimy,
Dirty
dirty, like,
Harry,
yeah,
Charles
taking his
Bronson.
pillow, 1, 2, 3, like
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah,
really, yeah.
yeah.
So Chicago was like that, and then it was cleaned up, and it was cleaned up for by Richard Daley, and we once he left, you ended up he was sort of the corrupt politician holding the city together through his benevolent corruption, and then we ended up with Rahm Emanuel, and he was part of the Obama
Obama. Yeah.
administration. Not really good at anything. He wasn't good in the Obama
Good at
administration.
getting elected.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's it. Um, and I think it was the perfect tinderbox of the failure of the government during a pandemic, the George Floyd riots, everything just sort of culminated into what made Chicago really scary, you
Well,
know,
what I'm
now.
talking about, like Chicago getting that name, Chirac. This has been going on,
Oh yeah,
for a while. So I remember when I think it was President Obama's first or second inauguration, where there was a young black student, teenager, she went there either to read or something like that. And then she went back home to Chicago, and like a week or two later, she got shot just
yeah,
walking to school. So
yeah,
you mentioned like a lack of programs or whatever inside these neighborhoods for these kids to develop, like education and stuff like that. But let's go back to the basics. Like these kids aren't safe walking to school. And in
yeah,
an American city, a big city, one of the best cities we have. I love Chicago. I heard it referred to as the America city, and that New York is sort of the city of the world. But if you want to
right,
know how America is, like
right.
go to Chicago, and it's just Obama. Like he claims being from there. Ron Emanuel, part of Obama's guy. All these liberal people who are representing Chicago, and yet it's just going down the drain. It's how come nothing has happened? I don't understand that.
Yeah. I mean, if you've got any solutions, it's time to throw your hat in the
Okay,
ring.
so I got one. I'm not wearing a hat, but
Please do. Yeah.
so you know that my family comes from Puerto Rico, and I
Yes.
remember being a young man, I would say around 15 years old, and talking to someone who had just come back, a family member, something I don't really remember, saying that in certain neighborhoods and projects, buildings that were so bad, so crime infested with drugs and gangs, that the Puerto Rican government sent in the National Guard because it was just that bad. I'm
Yeah.
wondering why something like that hasn't happened. Is that because of political thing? Like they just don't want to seem militant or something?
Well, that's part of it, but I think the other part of it is that a lot of those projects that are in Chicago are gone now.
Okay.
There's a lot more mixed neighborhoods. I think part of it is that. So I don't know if you know much about Chicago.
Little, I mean, it's been a while, yeah.
You've got on the south side, you've got two bigger streets that run up. You've got Cottage Grove, and you've got dang it, it just popped out of my head for
Doesn't
whatever
matter.
reason.
It's all right. It's all right.
But now Stony Island. But now you've got like those were sort of the main thoroughfares through the south side. Now you got like Starbucks and stuff sitting there.
Gentrification.
So as areas start to gentrify, it's pushing people further and further into these smaller and smaller areas. When they got rid of the projects, they started moving people out, into the burbs, into mixed housing, whatever whatever the flavor of the day for whatever they wanted to call it was. But they don't supply people with the tools to succeed there. If you're plopping people down in a food desert and they don't have transportation, what do? That's one of the things that New York has. You've got your bodegas all over.
Right. Yeah.
Chicago, being in the Midwest, you get like Family Dollar in the middle of town. Well,
Okay.
that's not doing you any good. You're not getting a lot of the things that you need. And I think I think that, well, I don't yet, and I don't know if New York ever had it, but so when I grew up in Hammond, have you ever heard of Gary, Indiana?
Oh God, yes, that place.
Okay,
Really bad.
so
Yeah.
I grew up 8 blocks from Gary, right? So Gary, one of the things that happened to Gary, it was in 1913 or something. It was the city of the century, right?
Oh wow.
It was a city built around a steel mill. The founder of the city was named Eldridge Gary. He was the president of U.S. Steel, which is still there today. And you had people like my grandparents who were coming either off the farm or off the boat or out of the coal mines or something like that to move to Gary to work at the mills and work at the refineries to have a better life. So what happened in Gary was in the 1960s, you had that second immigration wave, and that was poor blacks moving from the south to the north to work at the mills and have
Right. Yeah.
and what ended up happening is you had white flight. So you had all the white people take off. They actually formed a city just south of Gary where they all moved to. It's called Maryville. It's still there. And basically abandoned their houses because they knew that the real estate
Overnight. Yeah. Yeah.
and the whole city just went to hell because of this white flight. You lost your entire infrastructure. You lost your entire tax base. And I think part of that might have to do with, because you got to remember, New York and Chicago and LA, you're on the coast.
Mm-hmm.
So you've had a history of immigration.
Right.
Of
Yeah.
people from all over coming in all the time. This is still the Midwest. Like Chicago is still in the Midwest. So there's a different perception of the way things work. And I think that's why it has unique problems. I wish I had the solution, man.
Yeah,
But
I know.
It's one of those where I was at a mall one time in the 90s, and they had a shooting at the mall while I was at the mall.
Yeah.
And they didn't even evacuate. Like they
just
closed
one shooting, just one guy. Don't worry about it.
Bookstore, they closed the place where the shooting was. They didn't evacuate the mall. They were like, oh,
yeah.
But I mean, statistically, I don't know how bad if Chicago has statistically a worse crime rate or just a worse reputation for crime or per capita. I don't know. It's but it stinks. And you have to think, Chicago is a giant. You've got downtown, and then you've got all
little
the
areas around that, right?
That really basically cover 3 states.
Yeah.
You've got it goes almost all the way up
Wisconsin.
to Wisconsin. I'm sitting 45 minutes from the city here in Indiana, and we're still considered a Chicago suburb. I don't get Indiana news. Like if the governor does a press conference, it doesn't come on the TV. You
don't even know about it, right? Yeah.
Because we get Chicago news. And it's been like that my whole life,
Yeah.
So.
All right,
man, I wish I could fix it, but
yeah.
Who knows?
We'll do this again, man. Thank you for coming on.
Hey, it was my pleasure.
Oh, this thing is not working.